against my luck.
What's good in you, sir?
Thank you, Ensign.
Wait a minute, aren't you two wearing the wrong color? Don't you know anything about this period in time? I'm a doctor, not an historian.
In the old days, operations officers wore red, command officers wore gold.
And women wore less.
I think I'm going to like history. The original Enterprise used an old-style geotronic sensor array. If we wait for just the right point in the scan cycle, we can decloak the Defiant for almost 3 seconds without being detected.
Isn't that enough time to transport us aboard?
Barely.
Chief, here are the coordinates. The captain and I will start on deck 4 and work our way aft. You and Julian should start on deck 21.
And work our way forward.
What about the station?
Little of it is habitable. Most of K7 consists of storage areas and industrial fabrication facilities.
It shouldn't take long to search. Security isn't as tight as it is on a starship.
Remember, try to avoid contact with people at this time period.
We're coming up on a band shift in the scan cycle.
Dax?
I think the money part of that whole clip is the very beginning where they first get in those awesome outfits. They've got the hairdos, right, Matt? They got everything looking slick, and they make those great jokes. Those great callback jokes.
The equipment. I mean, this is what I love about DS9 more so than some of the other spin-off series, is because I feel like, and I kind of got the impression from reading the that 50-year unauthorized history of Star Trek book that the other spin-off shows where both Gene Roddenberry in the terms of Next Generation and Rick Berman in terms of Next Generation and Voyager, they were very, very hesitant, and I don't know why. I guess it was because they wanted each series to stand on its own, but they were very, very hesitant about referencing anything that came before, especially if it was original series. And to me, I mean, looking back on it now, I get that they wanted their shows to stand on their own, but to me, that's what I want to see. Is especially since in this day and age of shared universes, I mean, Star Trek was one of the original shared universes, if you want to think about it that way. So, this is why I like DS9 more so than, say, the Voyager episode that aired with this, is because I feel like this episode fully embraced its past and what it was going for, whereas I feel like that Voyager episode, it just so happened that it was taking place at the same time as Star Trek 6, but it wasn't important to the story, really.
And it does such a great, seamless job of embracing the inherent goofiness of the original series, too, because that's part of the endearing quality of it. It's part of the history of it. And they don't shy away from, embracing the silly parts of it, too. And I love it for that. The dress, the hair, the Klingon stuff, when we get to that. It's just they completely embrace it. And it's also telling that they decided to do this episode with one of the goofier episodes of the original series. And I just love that. We made this argument before. It's whether they set a goal and how much they really commit to going all in on getting to their goals. And they swung like you wouldn't believe at this one. And they connected. They picked the most fun episode and they went all in on embracing the story with it.
Well, I mean, if you're going to use baseball metaphors, Matt, I not only do I think this is a home run, this is probably a grand slam of an episode.
Oh yeah, because I guess one of the options was, if they were going to do this, they could go back and revisit the mob world that Kirk and Spock went into, and it's like,
no, thank you. That wasn't one of my favorite episodes anyway.
Right, but it's just like, yeah, if you're going to do this, go for it, and great job, because they do go for it here.
I liked this scene. It was a little bit of a montage scene with them putting on the uniforms and the going back in the nostalgia. And granted, we are considered very expert type viewers, but I like the fact that they explained a little bit of the stuff. Oh, sorry, I'm wearing the lieutenant rank, or why are you wearing red? And my daughter looked at it and said, why is Dax wearing red? She should be in blue. And I said, well, and she goes, oh, she's going to die, isn't she? So I kind of had a little bit of a chuckle. I said, not in this episode, but
I was going to say you're about a season too early on that one.
Yeah, exactly. But, I still like it. It's this is just a very nostalgic episode. It's just phenomenal. And like you said, the hair's done right. Bashir didn't have to do his hair like that, but they made it. And even O'Brien, they greased his hair back, and just all the little things were it was just done so perfect here.
I was gonna say the only thing they didn't do Cisco, and that's because he has no hair.
Right. They managed to strike, in my opinion at least, essentially a perfect balance of complete fan service. Yet they knew this episode was going to be one of the ones that can bring people in who've seen under 5 episodes of Star Trek. This is one of the ones that they might jump in because they know the original Tribbles episode. This is the one they'll jump in. So they do a really good job of explaining stuff at a very basic level, reminding you of the plot of the original one, just basic rules of the universe. And it's practically seamless. You don't feel like it's bonk bonk. Here's the explanation to newbies. Us who know all this stuff, nobody probably was irritated with them trying to sit down and explain it, right? It's in there, and it's practically seamless, in my opinion.
I mean, I don't mind them sitting down and explaining it because I want to see how these characters that we've been following for 5 years, how they react to the original series and its events and its aesthetic and everything like that. That's part of the fun of it for me as a fan.
Right. That's why it works so well. And I was thinking of it during that clip. You might think that this episode is purely a gimmick. And, it largely is, but don't dismiss it just that easily. I think we could do a separate mini UP vote inside this episode because our 4 main characters, like Odo and Worf, are solid. But I think, in my opinion, they take a little step behind Cisco, Dax, Miles, and Bashir. They take the step to the front, and those guys, all 4 guys and girl, they all absolutely shine in this episode too. So just to say it's a gimmick Forrest Gump episode doesn't do them justice. No. They're all hilarious and great in their own little ways in this episode.
And this is one of those episodes again where it's the ensemble crew for the most part. Yeah, Quark wasn't really in it, nor was Kira really much in it, but I love the pairings again. I thought we always talk about this in certain episodes about did they pair the right people up? And I think absolutely they paired the right people up in this episode. Like just even Odo and Worf, and I agree with you, Smonsky, that they did take a back seat, but they still were paired up. I thought they were paired up quite well, and I just continue to laugh out loud throughout the whole episode today. And I've seen this episode so many times, but
even if Odo and Worf did take a backseat in this episode, damn, do they still have their moments, especially when we get to the part where Worf has to explain the difference between 23rd century Klingons and the 24th century ones.
Yeah. It's a great pairing because it's like weirdly uncomfortable Worf, and we find out why, and he's in that goofy costume. And then just human Odo, who is just in a weird spot, I guess, is kind of the way to put him. He is bizarre this week, but I liked his weird mind space that he was in. So yeah, they're definitely the tertiary group, but they are still nailing it. But I'm going to say Miles was the jump out guy. Every line he had was basically funny and extra, kind of biting at Bashir's expense.
And the facial expressions too were phenomenal too.
And that's the
on
thing.
him.
That's what I think too. Is Miles and Bashir were kind of the comic relief, if you will. They were the more embracing the funny aspects of it. And what I like about Cisco and Dax, that pairing is us, the fans. Like they're in awe of everything because it's so
nostalgic
revered.
and yeah, and that's what I'm glad you brought that point up too. And even we saw this out of O'Brien, and I know we're jumping around in this episode, which is fine.
It's what we do.
Yeah, but I love the fact that not only were they nostalgic, but they were starstruck. Oh my God, it's Kirk, and that scene where O'Brien is like, I think that's Kirk, and Bashir is squinting, kind of, I don't know, and even Worf is like, where? And that would be us if we were on that ship right now or on this space station. We would be doing the same thing. The four of us would be sitting around that table, and we would be all in awestruck. And might I add, I will not be wearing a red shirt. But no, I think that would that's so us. That is the fan. Right. I think it's so brilliantly done.
They definitely serve that role at the table, but like I said, I think it's Cisco and Dax that mainly serve those roles. As they're mainly the fan, especially Dax.
Oh, Dax is at maximum Dax this week. I mean, her character is just funny, smart, extraordinarily charismatic. She has that weird kind of like, not necessarily blink and you miss it sexuality, referencing her
let's wait till we get there. Where are we in the notes? Let's get to where they're on their separate missions.
So everyone settles in and we all admire the stunning recreation of the original series motif until Odo finally ends up at the infamous bar. A buxom and scantily clad young lady who is a great recreation of a background tertiary character from the actual episode.
I noticed that too. I watched the episode before. I watched the original episode before I watched this one, and yeah, there was a waitress.
It is insane how they pulled that off. Anyway, you go to the scene with Kirk and Spock at that bar. You'll see her in the background, and you'll be like, "That's delightful. I love that they did that. That they actually watched it and were that close." Anyway. A buxom and scantily clad young lady comes to ask for his order. He gathers his wits and asks for a Raktajino. They, of course, don't serve this, but he finds out that Darwin has been here before he was, and he'll probably be returning. Meanwhile, Julian and O'Brien are working in an area where someone else is supposed to work. Hijinks ensue, and finally they shuffle off. Back to Odo, who has now been joined by Worf at the bar, and Odo has bought a Tribble. Worf, of course, hates this. He reviews the history of Tribble eradication. Odo throws some shade at the big bad Klingons who would wage a war with cute tiny little furballs before klaxons sound. And we're back with Cisco and Dax.
Yeah,
we're heading to their battle stations.
Okay, you could stop now because there's a lot of things that are going on. But there's a few other aspects of this episode that I like. We mentioned Bashir and O'Brien being sort of more comic relief sort of people. And I kind of like the touch that, just because this era of Starfleet history is so revered, they can't really adapt to some of the old technology. And, I kind of find that realistic in the sense that, like, I know how to work a laptop, but you put me in front of something from the 60s with punch cards, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And they feel embarrassed about it too, right? And it's hilarious.
But it's not only just that, it's also the joke at what we know and love about Scotty, is that everything's cross-patched and that's the very in joke of like, no, these ships aren't just old and archaic. It's been lovingly put together by this kooky character that we loved 30 years ago at the time of this filming. So it's not even just them out of place. It's still a very in-universe joke lovingly at the expense of a beloved character.
Yeah, and something else that's at the expense of a beloved character. I had definitely seen. I saw this not on first airing, but saw it years later on VHS, and it was already after I had seen the original series episode. And me as a fan, I was waiting the whole time for Worf to react to a Tribble because that had to come at some point.
And I just got to appreciate. So this is where I'll kind of like jokingly point out my Klingons are posers argument, how they waged this glorious war against the Tribbles. That said, I gotta at least give a little props to the writers for rightfully pointing out Tribbles would be an ecological disaster. Just like the goofy little string of reality that they dump into here. And like, actually, yeah, let's pull that through to its logical conclusion. These things would be a menace. Hilarious bit of just reality in the goofiest of goofy episodes.
Yeah, but they're such a menace that they had to wage get rid of them.
Shit.
No, it's fine.
Are you still there, Matt? Here,
Yes,
repeat
it's
that.
fine.
Just take a break or a pause and just repeat that last comment there because you cut out completely.
But it's hilarious to think that the Klingons had to wage full-out war to get rid of them.
Well, they
It's
could have
like-
just put lizards down on the planet that they were on. Right? Reptiles? Giant reptiles?
Well, I mean, if you want to cross over with the animated series there, Chris, they had that Tribble eating thing that was in that Tribble episode.
Doesn't exist. Never happened. It's all fake. Well, anybody else got anything to say about all that awesomeness that happened there before we move on?
just that
Sorry, go ahead.
Cyrano Jones. Just we got his horrible, goofy, awesome. I'll add that too. Just 1960s overacting, comedic acting. We got that good taste in here too.
Yeah.
I would have been really disappointed if we didn't get to see him carrying that drink out, in the most heightened Laurel and Hardy kind of style. If that didn't make it into this re-added, So very happy that gets in there.
Well, we haven't got to the bar fight yet.
I know, but how much more are we going to talk about Cyrano Jones?
This is the one and only chance.
I'm seizing my opportunity.
I mean, have we even gotten to the? Oh yeah, that was when they first beamed in. Bashir and O'Brien can't figure out how the old turbolifts work.
Yeah,
that's set up for a joke that's about to come in our third clip.
Yeah, right. Go ahead.
All right, so it turns out a Klingon battle cruiser has arrived, and it's Koloth's ship. Dax fawns over this, and Kira lets them know that 2 Klingons just beamed to the station. Sisko decides to send O'Brien and Bashir so as not to meddle with the timeline, Dax. She regrets not being able to see her friend Koloth in his prime, though. O'Brien and Julian, looking for a discreet place to be when the inevitable beam-out happens, choose a turbo lift, which leads us to our third clip.
Hello again.
Hello. Deck 10?
Your flap's open.
Excuse me?
On your tricorder, you're draining power.
Oh. Thank you. He's always doing that.
You're a doctor?
Yes.
I just transferred here from the Lexington last week.
Welcome aboard.
I'm coming into sickbay tomorrow for my physical. $1,500. Lieutenant Wiley.
You realize, of course, she was just using you to get to me. Watley. That was my great-grandmother's name. Funny. And I think she was in Starfleet. Well, that's a common enough name. But what if that was her? Oh, do you realize the odds? No one ever met my great-grandfather. This could be a predestination paradox.
Come on, Chief, surely you took elementary temporal mechanics at the academy. I could be destined to fall in love with that woman and become my own great-grandfather.
You're being ridiculous.
Ridiculous. If I don't meet with her tomorrow, I may never be born.
Chief, are you ready for transport?
Are we ever?
Stand by.
You saw the way she looked at me. You can't just dismiss this.
I can try.
All right. Fine. But I can't wait to get back to Deep Space Nine and see your face when you find out that I never existed.
Probably my favorite joke of the entire episode is that scene.
I love the flap scene, and O'Brien just looks down at his crotch to see, because we'd all do the same.
By the way, even after that, like, she was coming on. Like, was everyone horny on this ship? Not just Kirk?
Oh yeah, everybody.
This is
It was the
classic
60s.
Star Trek.
Free love.
And I loved O'Brien because I've used that line before. You know, she's just using you to get to me. You know, that's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, that's where he is awesome this week, just being just a little bit vicious in the guy humor. Now, I would like to point out, we need to maintain our nerd cred here. Futurama did this exact thing.
Yes, they did.
Fry is his own great-grandfather or whatever. So they followed that joke to its logical
In
conclusion.
fact, I heard it was inspired by this, so...
Oh, I'm sure.
I would like to know what Data Logan has to say about Bashir not knowing some of these factors, though, because if he was genetically enhanced, he would have certainly have known, who his grandmother was and all that kind of stuff, or how to use the turbo lift. But
I was going to say, if he was genetically enhanced, he would have already known how to use the 23rd century technology, so we could just put that to the side this week.
yeah, exactly.
Would that become? Do they plug in 100-year-old technology into your genetic?
It doesn't make you...
Your grandmother.
No, but
Genealogy is automatically plugged into that genetic enhancement.
No, but if you study, remember how quickly it took Khan to learn how to run the Enterprise via just watching the tapes. So,
okay, all right. I mean,
and he said Chief O'Brien went to the academy. O'Brien didn't go to the academy.
maybe he just didn't care about this. Maybe he didn't care about his grandma until this woman.
Yeah, I'm going to have to side with Chris this week.
That's true.
I don't know. I don't know that that's something that has to be in there. I think Data Logan's just going to laugh at us and move forward. But who knows? Maybe there's a book about it, and we'll hear all about it. I love that scene. I'm glad that we could listen to it. I'm glad that you all get to listen to it again. It's hilarious. But Dax and Sisko are continuing to look for Darwin, and when they catch sight of Kirk and Spock, it's awesome.
I think this was my favorite scene.
Dax is all about some Spock. Then our captain and the old man have to roll out to continue their search. Dax is completely starstruck, and she and Sisko discuss their fandom, but they have a job to do, and they get back to it. This is your favorite scene?
Yeah, I just like the way that they both react to it, and I think Dax being into Spock rather than Kirk is a commentary on how fandom went back in the 60s. Everyone expected Kirk to be the one that got all the fan mail, but it was actually Leonard Nimoy.
Yep.
And it's a nice little thing that they held this scene in their pocket for a little bit into the episode. They didn't just stampede to put Kirk as the first thing you see. So I like that you had to wait a little bit for the money shot, if you will, of the main two guys that you want to see.
And also, I didn't mention this earlier, but I guess I should have, because they've been using the original series communicators this whole time. I actually read a fun little tidbit that a couple of the actors were having trouble how to get it to do that perfect flip open so it stays open, and like they would do on the old show. And actually, because they had built the old sets, Walter Koenig was visiting and saw the new sets and actually showed a couple of the DS9 crew how to properly do the communicator flip. I just thought that was fun.
Man, I want to believe that, but I just gotta say that sounds like the anecdote that they make up.
No, I mean, no, that's direct. Well, whether or not you want to credit Iron Stephen Bear as credible, I take him at his word.
I want to believe, but it's not. I can't.
Why can't we just have fun things?
I want fun things. I'm telling you, I want to believe. Let's move on.
I just wanted to add though, and I know you've been calling it the Forrest Gumping there, Smonsky. I still just absolutely love it. Like I honestly, I'm totally into this. I'm not trying to sit there and pick out, oh, where's the split screen or anything like that, but just everything. Even when Dax and Cisco were walking away down the corridor, you could still hear the conversation going on in the background. Just attention to detail on everything from, visually and audio, and all the audio stuff. Just I don't know. And again, maybe this is. I look at it from remembering when I first saw this. It was, Forrest Gumping wasn't really around. I don't even think Forrest Gump had existed, or maybe it was around that time. I honestly can't remember now, but it was. I'm just all into this, completely, including the bar fight scene and all that, which we'll get to later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely good for its time. I mean, there's even parts that are very impressive when, I mean, I'm skipping ahead, but we're talking about the technical stuff here. When Kirk is giving a dressing down to Miles and Bashir, he steps in front of him and a shadow passes over Miles's face, and it's supposed to be Kirk's shadow. And it doesn't look perfect, but it looks pretty dang impressive still for the time. So yeah, it never gets to the point of pulling you out, but you still can see what they're doing, and it just is perfect tonally for what's going on. Just the goofiness of it. And again, where is the criticism in this episode?
I was gonna say, to be honest with you too, like I'm so into just seeing them share the same frame with the 1960s actors that I'm not even looking at shadows being cast wrong. So like until you mentioned that, I would have never guessed to look for it or even cared to look for it.
Well, the fact that it's there is one of the reasons that you never think to look for it, because it's working seamlessly enough that nothing is necessarily calling out to your eye that this isn't playing right. It's playing close enough that it's not jumping out. But if that wasn't there, maybe something in the back of your head will go, oh, this looks wrong and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Maybe so, but by the time we get to that scene, I'm so in the vibe of this episode that I really don't care.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's super well done. Did they win some awards for this episode? Because of how seamlessly they integrated these two?
I want to say they did, but I should maybe memory alpha it.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to win some UPs.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Way more important. So
let's get to the bar fight.
Meanwhile, Miles and Julian arrive at the bar. They trade barbs with Odo and Worf, but this is put to a quick end when Kirk arrives. It's not really Kirk. We all know this. The waitress notes that there are Klingons all around, but no one from our crew recognizes them, except Worf. Everybody looks to Worf and quizzes him on who these Klingons might be. He claims, "We don't talk about it with outsiders." And then Chekhov, Scott, and a red shirt get into a nice little bar fight with a rowdy Klingon. And go. What do we have to say about all of those things?
I do think it's funny that the explanations that Bashir and O'Brien offer, like, was it some sort of disease, some sort of genetic mutation? It ends up being both of those things when we get to Enterprise.
Yeah, and I clearly remember this scene, and I thought just for that split second when it's going through your mind, holy cow, we're actually going to finally get an explanation. Looking back on it now, obviously, you don't. But at that split time, when first watching it, going through my mind, I'm like, wow, we are finally going to get a real explanation about what happened. And then just the way Worf sold it, it was like just hilarious. And you just kind of throw your arms up and kind of have a chuckle over it.
Anytime I get to reference Big Trouble in Little China, I will leap at the chance again. This is straight out of plot hole writing in Big Trouble in Little China. One of the characters in that movie somehow manages to get into a hole in the ceiling. It's a plot hole. They ask him how he did it, and he simply says, "Wasn't easy." And there you go. Plot hole completely sealed. Perfect writing. Efficient, done. They do the exact same thing here. Why are you different? We don't talk about it. Perfect. That's all I need. Done, explained. It's hilarious. It's efficient. Let's move on. We all know the reason why, so make a joke of it. And it's great. I loved it.
Yeah, it's totally correct for where we are. I think if an explanation would have been out of place for this episode. This isn't an explanation type of episode. This is a romp in the 60s world of TOS. And so the jokey nature, the we don't like to talk about it from prune juice drinking Worf, who's probably constipated at the moment because he doesn't have any prune juice around, is the absolutely appropriate answer in this instance for this episode. Anybody got anything else to say about the bar fight?
I have a comment about the bar fight. In an episode rich with so many little trivia pieces, tiny little things that you love, the musical score that hints at the Enterprise, the original score before you see it when there's static on the screen. There's so many good things. My absolute favorite thing is the dumbest thing in this episode, but it's perfect for 1960 Star Trek. When they're breaking up the bar fight, they show Bashir being stopped by a gigantic guy extra, like comedically huge. That is such a perfect reference to the exact type of joke that they would have done in that original series of just a huge broad-chested lunkhead coming in and stopping it. It's perfect for exactly what extra they would have used in that original series to break up the fight and have Chekhov get, bounced around. It's subtle stuff, but it just shows the attention of care and detail. If somebody had the absolute perfect tonal answer to every bit of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that guy and like, I know this isn't the kindest thing to say, but lumpkin is probably the right term, because it was just like, I don't know if this guy can speak English.
Call him a meathead.
Yeah.
All right, so the Stiffs start to give Sisko a little bit of a hard time about his men getting involved in this bar fight. That's not right, Sisko. How could you allow this? And Sisko argues, nothing's different. Maybe they shouldn't have done it, but everything seems good here. They hate that answer, of course. And then we get back to the story. The men who were involved in the bar fight were arrested, but eventually turned over to Captain Kirk. And then we get the fantastic dressing down scene in its entirety, but this time with a few extra tidbits. This entirety, it's all cut up, but it's awesome nonetheless, with the shadow and all. As Bashir and O'Brien leave the dressing down, they run into a Tribble, and he's not alone. Odo and Worf, meanwhile, are welcoming Darvin, who they got during the bar fight, back onto the Defiant. They let him know the ramifications of his actions, and they put him in the brig. And they get a little tidbit of information. Turns out there's a bomb in a Tribble somewhere, and they have to find it before it blows Kirk to bits. Dun, dun, dun. The plot thickens.
You know what I appreciate about this plot, and we should probably discuss it, since this is an episode where they try to make something our story is something that's happening in parallel with another episode. It all fits in pretty seamlessly, which is something that's quite amazing, and something they don't always get right, because as seamless as this is, if no one's repressed the memory of Enterprise's last episode out of their mind, there's no way that episode fits into the Pegasus. It's all over the place.
Why'd you have to bring that up? You're absolutely right.
To give a compliment to this episode.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Like there's nothing that happens out of sequence or is incongruent with what happens in the original episode.
Yeah, I think the closest thing is that you can look down the line in the original and tell that O'Brien and Julian aren't there, but who cares, right? So at that point, you're fully invested. You know that they've interrupted the timeline.
No, but even just like one of the things that I love too is that, just little things like the next scene when they're on the bridge, Dax and Sisko are on the bridge trying to scan for the bomb. there is that point where Kirk sits down on his chair, has a Tribble, and in the original episode, he turns his head to look kind of like off screen, but they put Dax in the right position where he would have been looking, and she gives his little shrug. So like just that specific attention to detail,
which they definitely showed, and we mentioned it earlier with the waitress, right? I mean, they've shown really close attention to detail in this one.
It's like, how many times did they watch the original episode to figure out every little spot? Like sitting on the Tribble and thinking I thought the bomb was going to go off when he sat on it. Yeah. I mean, it's just, they found every exploitable little part and milked it. So
even when Dax and Cisco were in the grain bin, and they threw one of the Tribbles out, and then sure enough, that's the one that lands on his head. Yeah. No, that's you're absolutely right. You do wonder how many times they watched this and broke it all down, but it seamlessly fit in. It didn't feel forced at all. It was really good.
And I would like to point out, when I matched the colors of the ones they were throwing out to when it hit Kirk's head, they matched the colors of the Tribble.
Oh yeah.
When you can actually connect it as a throw, they of course. If they're going to watch everything else, how are they going to miss that at this point?
True
enough.
They
probably watched this on the computer and analyzed it frame by frame. You know. Let's get to the scene on the bridge though, because I think that's maybe my second favorite moment is when we find out about Dax and McCoy.
Okay, I don't think I actually made specific mention, so I'll let you. You mentioned that real hard here. So we get more cool original episode interlay and Dax and Cisco futilely looking for a needle in a haystack. Dax and Cisco finally decided they need to make the play to stay close to Kirk and keep searching for this bomb. Again, cool intermingling of the new with the old, as Matt has so eloquently put it.
And quite literally, too, we find out about Dax and McCoy's history, shall we say.
Amen.
Dax, one of the previous Dax hosts, bagged McCoy. And I have to imagine, like, McCoy looked like Carl Urban back when Dax met him. So, like, I think that I would have bagged him, too.
I had to come off mute to laugh at that one for you.
You know that little the LGBT flag on Facebook, the like button? I'm hitting that right now for you, Matt. Right there. For you.
Just keep your tricorder flap closed, Matt.
Keep your tricorder flap closed, and make sure that if it's your grandmother, you let that happen so that you actually do. Oh man! All right, yeah, that's awesome. Bones, Dax, lovely. Cisco and Dax go to the.
And just that eyebrow wag.
So Cisco and Dax end up in the storage compartment right above where Kirk is going to be at the end, and they start digging through Tribbles. Kirk opens the hatch, just as he should, and finally, with that, they find it. They beam that sucker into space, and the episode finishes as it's supposed to, with history continuing uninterrupted.
Right. And you know, I think it's also kind of fun, too, that they managed to make what's a really funny scene in that episode, the one scene that everyone remembers where Kirk has all the Tribbles fall on his head. They do actually manage to make that scene tense because of the bomb thing, which I'm kind of impressed with. I mean, I know Kirk's not going to die, but they still were able to milk it.
The thing I like about this, too, is, you know, we just watched this episode. You can almost go watch the original episode and think, oh yeah, Cisco and Dax are up in that grain bin.
I always do. Every time I watch the original episode, even though they're not there in frame, I think that they're there.
Yeah, and that's what's so brilliant about it, right? Or
And I would just like to point out, you can watch the original episode, not feel it's any way made fun of or diminished by this. Because you could easily see somebody going in and watching it and thinking it's just making fun of the goofiness back then. And it's definitely not. So it's in no way hurting the original.
But this is what I mean, the difference between the DS9 staff and some of the other staff on the other series is that I feel like DS9 just embraces Star Trek's past, especially TOS, you know, imperfections and all, where I feel like some of the other ones are embarrassed by its past and try not to talk about it.
Well, if anything, you would almost argue that maybe other shows would go back and almost try to recreate the original episode because, you know, they feel they can do that and their show is more superior. here DS9 just embraced it. They never changed it. They never changed the flow, the intent, or the tone of it, and that's what makes this such a great episode.
And they had fun, and you could tell that the fun was like seeped throughout this, because I feel like they took the same attention to detail and maybe not the same attention to detail, but they took care and they did attention to detail with the Voyager 30-year episode, but it just can't hold a candle to this because
again, like the time travel and the putting in Star Trek 6 in that episode feels completely incidental. Here, there's a reason we're going back to Tribbles. It has to do directly with Darvin's past. You know, there's a reason for the story to go here. In the Voyager one, it felt arbitrary because we have to have a 30th anniversary episode.
Amen. A little more attention to detail.
And real quick, since Matt dropped it right there, Darvin, I don't think we really necessarily mentioned it's the same actor who was in the original series too. And that's just like, oh, good on them. Great for the actor to be there and be able to come back and reprise that role. Like, who would have ever thought he would have that chance to do it? And
I mean, not to be all morbid or anything, but they were lucky he's still alive. I mean, because that's not always a guarantee when you're bringing back someone who played a role 30 years ago, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up and go into some final thoughts. So Kira prays, and magically the orb can send them back home, wrapping around the Earth twice and flipping through some space-time continuums. But first...
See, that would have been the perfect cherry on top, as if they had to go around the sun to get back, but that's a little too much to ask for, so I'm good.
Oh, I would have killed to have a trippy, giant, melty head dream sequence of all the DS9 people.
Dax and everybody. Yeah. For some reason, Quark shows up in there. Anyway,
it would have fit more. It probably would have fit just as well as how you managed.
Quark's big ass head coming out of the clouds.
Where does Morn's head end? They would have to just put his whole body in the trippy sequence. Anyway, but
well, Morn would take the place of the humpback whale that we get in that sequence.
Oh God! So first, Cisco has to do one last thing, and this gives us our final clip.
And this was awesome.
By the time we returned to the Defiant, Major Kira had discovered how to use the orb to bring us back to our own time.
And that's when you returned to the present?
Well, not exactly. Before we left, I realized there was one last thing I had to do. Something I've been thinking about ever since I saw that ship on the view screen. Excuse me, Captain. Here's tomorrow's duty roster for your approval.
Lieutenant
Benjamin Sisko, sir. I've been on temporary assignment here. Before I leave, I just want to say it's been an honor serving with you, sir.
All right, Lieutenant, carry on.
Thank you, sir. If you want to put a letter of reprimand in my file for that, then go ahead.
We'll have to review the case before making any recommendations.
However, I don't think there was any harm done. Probably would have done the same thing myself. You'll be receiving our report in about a month. But based on what you've told us, I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Glad to hear it.
Goodbye, Captain.
Goodbye.
Docking port 7.
It went well. Good. The constable wants to see us on the promenade.
Did you tell them? You didn't ask. I'm open to suggestions, Pete.
We could build another station.
Another beautiful little touch. Did you guys, another attention to detail? They put Quark in the exact same position that the bartender at K7 is by the end of Tribbles, where he's just got all the tribbles over him and he's just got slumped on one hand. Do you notice that?
Not necessarily notice that, but it
I
seemed
missed
very
that.
familiar. And the other detail is the scene Cisco meeting Kirk is from it's from Mirror Mirror, I'm pretty
From
sure.
Yes, it
It
is.
is.
It's when,
So again, just encyclopedic knowledge that they went back to explain.
it's when.
But that's
it's
okay,
when-
though.
No, that's great. It's when Marlena shows up, the real Marlena, after they come back. But I'm so happy that they were able to discover a piece of the original series that would allow Cisco to meet Kirk believably. And it's so wonderful. And actually, what I get a kick out of that scene too is that this is terrible to say, but if you look at Uhura's staring at him too, and he's just thinking, what a fine-looking man. It just the expression on her face.
One last point about that stuff that I just love about Cisco is you see it's a very consistent thing with his character. And I know we kind of see this with so many of the captains because they're always just perfect people, but just his love of history that we see in so many episodes and his awareness of the bad parts and the knowledge of the good parts and the joy of the good parts. It's just such a nice aspect of his character. And we get to see him live and breathe the history that he is just that clearly is so important to him. So I love just seeing that here.
And sadly, the Great Tribble Hunt was all for naught because they end up repopulating the species.
What do you think Worf thinks of this new blight
Oh, he
of,
hates it.
of tribbles that are currently in the future? How many of them do you think that Odo stuffed in the Defiant in random little places that Worf would have to find later on?
I'm sure some of them are thinking. I'm sure some of them are thinking too. It's too bad we didn't have these like a year ago when we were at war with the Klingons. We could have just moved all these over.
That would have been hilarious.
All right, but I think that about does it. God, what a fun ride this week. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and be a little presumptive, but let's go into final thoughts and readings. So Blair, we'll start with you. Why is this episode 5 stars?
Well, I love this episode. I think, we've done so many of these episodes now. We've talked about plot points. We've talked about character development. We've nitpicked so many things. I think this is probably one of the first episodes, not the first, but one of the few episodes we've done in our UP2 run where I don't think we really had many negative comments. We were praising the attention to detail, the character moments, and this is just a fantastic episode. Very nostalgic, very great to see crossovers. You really feel that Cisco met Kirk. You really feel that Dax and Cisco were just around the corner with them. It's just fantastic. They made action figures based on this episode, and I'm a huge action figure collector. And I don't even know. I know where to begin. I don't even know where to end, I guess, is more importantly. I could go on forever about how fantastic this episode. I think we've pretty much covered a lot of it through all our comments throughout.
You know where you should end, Blair, is 5 stars.
Well, absolutely. I rate this much better than The Visitor, and should be the overall winner at the end of this series. But I will give this 5.0 nostalgic, fantastic, Deep Space Nine stars.
Chris, why is this episode 5 stars for you?
You know what? I was going to give it 5 stars until Blair had to bring up the wound that is The Visitor and throw salt in it in order to give his 5 stars. So you know what? This is 1 star, Blair. 1 star for you. I kid. This episode is amazing. I give it 5 out of 5 suspicious surly salesmen taking us back in time to touch TOS terrifically.
And Matt, does this break your pantheon into the best of the best? I should hope so.
It does. I mean, you can have different criteria for 5-star episodes. and you get like the thought-provoking visitor 5-star, and you'll get action episodes later on during the Dominion War arc that are 5-star for action. And then you get the fluffy, fun, just sweet, sacchary, hilarious episodes that can be 5 stars. And this is certainly one of them. The criteria for 5 stars is these are the ones that you could sit down somebody who isn't a fan and tell them, here's the good stuff. This breaks your misconceptions of what Star Trek is. Here are the elites. And this is maybe for that purpose even more important and maybe could transcend the 5-star. It's that good and that welcoming to so many audiences, I bet. So yeah, absolutely 5 stars.
And yeah, this is definitely 5 stars for me. If for nothing else, then I'll take the opposite of what Matt says. If this is great for non-fans, you can only imagine what it's like for someone like me who's lived and breathed Star Trek since he was 5. And just, watching these characters that I love go back in time and interact with the technology and the characters that I loved back then. I mean, who hasn't wanted to go back? Like this whole conversation, I have like a Bluetooth original series communicator that actually lights up and works. And as we've been talking about this, I've just been, opening and closing it all the time just because I love playing with that technology. And I could feel that from the characters this week and really from the writers. I mean, I mentioned other attempts to go back and embrace Star Trek's past, and the most infamous of them being the last episode of Enterprise, which was billed as some sort of Valentine to the fans. This is what an actual Valentine to the fans looks like. So this is absolutely 5 stars. One of the best episodes of the series, if not all of Star Trek, quite honestly. That was such a fun conversation, though. And we're going to follow it up with some feedback. I believe we're doing our feedback on To the Death. Is that right?
That is correct.
And I can start out with an email from one of our great feedbackers, Zubair. Very short comment regarding a throwaway line that's dropped in the episode. He mentions that the Bajorans have been fighting Breen privateers, and he rightfully points out that unless the definition of that has changed in the past 400 years, privateers are pirates that are endorsed by a government to raid other people's shipments. So he rightfully brings up, are the Bajorans at war with the Breen? And my argument to this would be, I would have to imagine this falls under not the in-world explanation, but this falls under writers finding a word that they like. Prion, what's the term for viruses for plants that they just love to throw into episodes because it sounds like a neat word. I gotta imagine privateer fell under that in this instance. Phage. Phages. Viruses targeting plants. There you go.
Well, next up we have Lieutenant Dan, who dropped in to the forums to discuss how he felt like this whole episode could have been avoided if Worf had proper bowel management from his doctor. And he made sure to note that Blair was a medic, and on the forums, Blair's also a rear admiral. So he made a great joke about how Blair should be able to see to this and recommend a solution for Worf. So he apologizes like 3 times for all of these comments.
Oh, man.
But, man, they're fantastic. Anyway, sorry. Blair?
Well, if you want to see my comment, you can just read the forums because, we'll just carry on from there. So Kieran McDuff rounds out our commenter for the week. And he's actually a little disappointed about this episode and points out a few, how shall I say, stupid things that he was not too impressed about. He felt that Sisko looked a little too short-sighted here, and he wasn't a big fan of that, and how they basically, the episode made Sisko looks stupid. He's also annoyed about the actual mission, and I think I pointed it out throughout in the podcast itself. But he basically said, they went in outnumbered, they didn't call for any backup, and somehow the odds are against them, but somehow they still succeed. But they don't even bother to even attempt to get any backup. He then proceeds to point out another fault of the episode about the whole fighting hand to hand, and because their weapons didn't work, and I think I pointed out that they didn't even have bayonets or anything like that to assist them. They just go down with their phasers. He does point out he did like the Iconians, and he does like the tension that did occur on the ship. He thought that was fantastic, and he also loved the introduction of Weyoun. He really gives full credit to the writers there. He does point out, as well as we did, that Upper Pylon 3 is fixed very, very quickly. And I think we mentioned that on the podcast, that it would have been nice to have a bit of continuity maybe for the rest of the season, or at least a few more episodes, that the pylon was still damaged. And, at the end of the day, he wants to give it a 5, but he really didn't like the mission. And he marks it a 4 out of 5. He wanted to make it a 3, but he did say that he would go with a 4. So thank you, Kieran. And there actually is one more post after that. And it is from Star Trek versus Star Wars. And they actually disagree with Kieran about Sisko being portrayed as dumb. And they kind of go on to say that his knowledge of the Iconians is shown there to impress Weyoun. And so they kind of go on to to disagree and talk about how Sisko is actually a little more on the ball this weekend. And the Renegade should have found a founder, should have had a founder hostage or something. That way they could have done something a little better. And then they go on to say then we wouldn't have had the ship. But anyways, they rebutted against Kieran's comments. So thank you for that as well.
And thank you for all your feedback. We definitely love hearing from you, and there are a number of ways to get a hold of us. You can email us at up2podcast@gmail.com, leave a comment in our forums at forum.trekmatefamily.com, follow us on Twitter at UP2podcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/upperpylon2. Also, 5-star iTunes reviews really help and get the word out there as we approach some of the best content that DS9 has to offer. This episode certainly being one of them, so we definitely appreciate those reviews, and we thank you for them. Also, you can reach all of us personally on Twitter. I am at mhansen0207, HANSEN, talking about all things Star Trek, nerdy, Marvel Cinematic Universe, anything, literally anything. Come find me there. We'll talk.
I could be found at ProSub0. Let's talk about how disappointing the Armada book by Klein is. What a sad follow-up to Ready Player One. Disappointing.
And I can be found at Medic1849, where by now the hockey playoffs are over, so I won't be tweeting about the Pittsburgh Penguins' successful Stanley Cup run. But you can see me tweeting about meeting Odo at the Niagara Falls Comic-Con. So that was kind of cool and very exciting that he was tweeting about me and me about him, and we got a little bit of UP2 love in there as well.
And
Chris, where's my freaking Golden Girls rewatch?
Well, it just happened last Friday. Weren't you paying attention? Okay, this Friday. Wibbly wobbly, it just happened last Friday. First one. That was I did episode 2. Didn't do the pilot because I did that months and months ago when I first got the series. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. If not, don't follow my Twitter because it's boring otherwise. There's nothing else going on there.
Which is at Carnivore J. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us this week. It's such a fun conversation. But man, has there ever been any more enjoyment whiplash than the 2 weeks that we've had this? So we go from one of the best episodes this week in Trials and Tribble-ations to one of the absolute worst next week as we review Let He Who Is Without Sin, sadly.
This is Blair from Ontario, Canada. Until next time.
You're the best around. No one's ever going to take you down. This is Chris in South Carolina.
Get your payments from the nation for your trials and tribulations. I'm Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Matt from Arizona. Closing hailing frequencies. Docking clamps are open and you are cleared for departure.